my friends are simps.
I've got a bit of a thing for sequencers, and I'm on a constant quest to experiment with all of the weird and wonderful varieties that are out there. Over the past year, anytime I've uploaded a video talking about a sequencer, a whole bunch of people have commented insisting that I check out the Oxi One. It has easily become one of the most requested videos on the channel, and so here we are. Oxi have kindly sent me one over to feature, and I've been playing about with it a lot over the past few months. You've probably already seen it pop up in a bunch of videos that I've shared as it performs various different tasks. I know you all are dedicated to watching every single upload of mine, so that won't be a shock. Now, I have to admit that I'm still wrapping my head around everything that it can do, and to be honest, I probably will be for some time to come, so this is not going to be some detailed walkthrough of all of the functions that are in there. However, I think at this point I can fairly confidently give you a bit of an overview, as well as my initial kind of take on it, for whatever that might be worth. The Oxi One is effectively a powerful multi-track sequencer which packs a load of features into a fairly compact but also premium package. Now, I realised that after I'd written this particular line that the Oxi website actually uses pretty much those exact words to describe it as well, but I promise you, I'm not just repeating their marketing copy blindly. It genuinely does just kind of fit that bill. The dominant characteristic of this device is, of course, the beautiful grid of 16:8 RGB LED pads, which are complemented by a sharp OLED screen, 4 encoders, and a selection of different function buttons. In terms of build quality, everything feels incredibly solid and well put together, and there's a reassuring heft to this. Overall, it's a very nice bit of kit. One slightly counterintuitive thing that I found about the design was that because of the way that the encoders are laid out with respect to the screen, they don't always correspond to the parameter that is closest to them. So you might have a knob that is right underneath a particular value, but it's actually a different knob that controls it in practice. This isn't a huge problem or anything, it just takes a wee bit of conscious focus for me to remember. The grid obviously lights up differently depending on the mode that you're in, and I really love how it displays information. I can't quite put my finger on why this is the case exactly, but the utilisation of the LED pads, the animations and the variable brightness levels just make it feel so snappy and dynamic. It's a very responsive and interactive, and a lot of thought has obviously gone into that side of things. There's a few different physical colour schemes available for the Oxi One, and I personally opted for the black version, not just because I'm some kind of middle-aged goth type, but also because it just looks cool as fuck. It does mean that the pads light up a wee bit differently, mind you, at the edges rather than the whole thing, so depending on your particular tastes, you might prefer the original. And it's okay, you can be wrong. Another nice bonus worth mentioning is that you get a hard case included with the purchase, which is a pretty cool addition and something that I think is easy to take for granted. The Oxi One is powered over USB-C, and it also has an internal battery, which is an inclusion that I am honestly consistently amazed by every time I use it. At first I was kind of like, well, when am I ever going to use this in a situation where I don't need power? But actually, there's lots of benefits to having a battery, not least the fact that if you accidentally knock the USB cable out, you don't lose your work because it's still turned on and it has a battery. In addition to MIDI over USB and Bluetooth, of all things, there's also an impressive array of additional physical connectivity available on the rear. That includes MIDI input and output on TRS mini jack, as one might expect, but also an analog clock output, a shared clock and CV input, and also a staggering 8 pairs of CV and gate outputs, which is 16 in total, and these can be configured in a whole variety of different ways. It's just madness, I love it. Now, as awesome as all of this is already, if you want to use your Oxi One primarily to sequence a modular system, it's also got an additional trick up its sleeve in the form of the pipe connection, which is a physical micro HDMI port. This curious oddity provides dedicated connectivity for the Oxi Pipe, which is a 6 HP Eurorack module, which then acts as a breakout board for the CV and gate connections. Effectively, what this means is that it can drastically simplify and separate out the cabling that would be required. For example, if you wanted to take your Eurorack case to a gig. In that scenario, instead of having to remember which output went to which part of your modular, you can have all of that pre-patched on the pipe, and then just use a single connection from the Oxi. It is such a good idea, and yet another example of how well thought out so much of this is as a package. The forward thinking doesn't stop with modular users either. If you're somebody that relies more on MIDI connectivity like myself, then Oxi also have a dedicated dongle called the Split. And this provides additional TRS MIDI outputs, a full-sized MIDI DIN output, a full-sized MIDI through port, and also expands the number of MIDI channels that you can utilise up to 48. And honestly, I can barely even wrap my head around that. Alright, so all of this is well and good, but ultimately is kind of irrelevant if the sequencer functionality itself isn't up to scratch. And thankfully, I can report that it definitely is. When it comes down to the particulars, the Oxi One has got 4 different sequencers, each of which have got 6 possible sequencer types to choose from. Those include the standard options like monophonic, polyphonic and chords, but also feature some more esoteric options like multitrack, stochastic and matricial, which kind of sound like Greek philosophers to me. Multitrack effectively provides 8 sequencers in one, with each individual row capable of being assigned to different MIDI channels. This makes it really easy to sequence drums or other monophonic instruments all from a single page. Stochastic and matricial are both creative sequencers, which lend themselves to generative or evolving patterns with options for probability, octave jumps and all that kind of good stuff. When it comes to project management, there are 15 projects available on board, each of which have got 64 patterns. Each pattern can be up to 128 steps long, and if you're using multi-track mode, you can have up to 32 tracks in total. Projects can be loaded during playback without any noticeable delay, which is a really good feature, and I would argue probably essential for playing live. In addition to this, you can record or draw out CC automation, and there's also something like 32 modulation lanes, which can also be sequenced individually, and honestly, my head is genuinely hurting just trying to comprehend everything that this thing is capable of doing, and I've barely even scratched the surface with this overview. There's tons of different randomization options, Euclidean pattern generators, arpeggiators, LFOs, etc. And I fear that there's no way I'm capable of doing it justice in this video alone. It's genuinely just such an impressive bit of gear. Having used the Oxi One for the past few months in my studio, I can now say that I understand the hype. It really is a great bit of equipment. It does take a wee bit of time to learn, and I sometimes forget what buttons do what, largely because of how capable it is, but that is to be expected, especially with a device that is this compact. I think we often have unrealistic expectations about being able to immediately dive into a feature-rich machine and just operate it flawlessly somehow from day one. And yeah, you will need to read the manual or watch some tutorials, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's probably actually a good thing. It's about time you lot learn some fucking patience. And I say that to myself as well, to be clear. The only other hardware sequencer that I have tried which comes close to the Oxi One is the Squarp Hapax. That's a device that is about the same price and which has lots of similar features, however it is much larger and actually has less CV and gate connections. As a result, in practice, I've found myself fairly consistently reaching for the Oxi One, although both of them are excellent in different ways. If you're trying to decide between the two of them, then ultimately it's going to come down to your particular requirements and preferred ways of working, I'm afraid. You'll just have to figure that out for yourself. I've been using the Oxi One in a variety of different circumstances, and it's kind of like this Swiss Army knife of sequencing. It's compact enough that it just sits up next to my desk without taking up any real space. And whenever I need it, I can just whip it out to build up loops with my hardware synthesizers or control software synthesizers like the Arturia suite from my laptop on the couch, which I can't really do easily with any of my other controllers. If you're looking for a capable, portable, well-built sequencer that's got a ton of options and connectivity, then the Oxi One fits that bill, and I can recommend it with some confidence. So you're right, I'm glad that you forced me to try this thing out. Good job. If you've got suggestions on which bit of gear I should beg a manufacturer to send me next, you know what to do. And that's it. That's the end of this video. I'm going to do a nice transition now. Oh, did it work? Oh, fuck.